Please join me in welcoming Nathan Reichstein from Moore Stephens NT. Nathan will share his insights regarding the federal budget delivered on the 2nd of April 2019 and the fallout from the NT budget, which was delivered by Nicole Madison last week.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Leon. So Leon rang me probably about 3 days ago and he said, mate, I've looked at your slides and can you make it interesting at all, because it seems pretty boring. So I'm going to try my best, but maybe Leon and I were having a discussion before, maybe it should have actually been about the cash splash the federal politicians are spending at the moment before this weekend's election. It might have been a bit more interesting. So in terms of some things we'll cover today, some business taxation, personal taxation, the black economy, superannuation, and then some small and medium businesses discussion. So I suppose the first one that they talked about was some private company benefits to shareholders or associates. So Division 7A, some small business owners might have heard. They've actually deferred the start date of that, and we're not sure when that's going to be, but that's not a bad sign. Hopefully they keep deferring it for a bit longer. Increased debt collections activities. So I suppose personally we've seen this in our accounting firm. A lot of clients are getting more phone calls, getting more follow-ups and collections. So they're going to be spending $42.1 million over 4 years. The focus is going to be on large businesses and higher wealth individuals. And the definition of high wealth individuals is net wealth over 50 million, but also wealthy individuals, which is the definition down for the ATO is controlling wealth of $5 million or more. So that will affect a lot of people, more so than the 50 million controlled wealth. 42 million is going to be a lot of money over 4 years to be able to, keep making sure that everyone pays their taxes. They're also going to be concentrating on superannuation liabilities, which we'll discuss a little bit further on. ATO funding for tax avoidance task force. So tax avoidance task force, a big spender, funding $1 billion over 4 years, targeting multinationals, large public and private groups, trusts and high wealth individuals. Within this, looking at specialised tax advisors for promoting schemes. So the actual tax accountants and lawyers that are advising clients to put them into some schemes that may be questionable are also going to be on the target. The ACCC funding to investigate commercial construction sector. So they're going to be spending $9.4 million over 4 years to continue and expand the investigations in the construction sector. Single touch payroll expansion, so that's actually been in for a little bit now. It's going to start to affect every business from 1 July this year. They're spending $82.4 million over 4 years to make sure that it's being complied with. Basically, welfare agencies will know when you're working and when you're getting paid. So the data that's going to be coming out of this single touch payroll is something very rich, and there will be no hiding anymore. Sham contracting, so they're actually establishing a specialised unit for that within Fair Work. Initial funding is $9.2 million over 4 years, and continued funding thereafter. So looking at employers who have contracting arrangements rather than employing staff, and a person is employed basically if you tell them when to work, how they work, and generally pay it on an hourly rate with no commercial risk. So if you do have contractors, you really do need to go on the ATO website, look at the tests and see if you can truly stand up and say that they are true contractors. The personal taxation, so individual tax cuts by 2024-25, so approximately 94% of Australians will have a marginal tax rate of less than 30% or 30%. The Medicare levy is going to have an increase adjustment for CPI, and the tax avoidance task force funding will with particular impact on high net wealth individuals, as outlined previously. The black economy, so this is effectively the cash economy, and this probably targets a lot of the tradies around Darwin and around Australia. So require ABN holders to lodge tax returns. Sounds pretty stupid, but a lot of ABN holders don't actually lodge tax returns and have nothing, apart from having an ABN, there is no real formal process to be seeing what information they're getting. So ABNs in the past have just been cancelled rather than actually following up on the outstanding lodgements. So that's a big change. Annual confirmation of ABN details will commence from 1 July 2022, and it will be provide greater transparency and compliance for these people that are doing ABN work. I suppose there's been some research done and some studies released, and I think in the NT, the biggest use of fraudulent ABNs is actually Bunnings on Bagot Road from tradies. So they're using that as their ABN to then not have to declare their income. Some smart people out there. Superannuation, so changes to the work test. Proposed that the work test, which is currently 40 hours over a 30-day period, it will not apply to those aged 65 or 66 from 1 July 2020. Also, those same Australians will be able to use their bring forward rules to effectively contribute $300,000 in a one-year period. Also, individuals aged up to 74 will be able to receive contributions made on behalf of their spouse. Amendments to protecting super packages, so agreed legislation regarding protecting your super, extending out the period after which the account is considered inactive to 16 months. And there's also a delay to the opt-in insurance to start from 1 October this year to members under 25 who have a super balance of less than 6,000. So currently, if you go to an industry super fund, they'll start taking out insurance premiums. There's now going to be an opt-in scheme from that as well, which will save some of the younger guys some small premiums in the short term. Possible establishment of a superannuation consumer advocate. So I think this would be a really good process if it does get up. Would represent consumers on policy decisions and also provide educational information and assistance to consumers in relation to the super system. So people don't understand the super system enough. A lot of schemes have been created where people are put into self-managed super funds that not necessarily should really actually have a self-managed super fund. So that's what this advocate system will be about. Some good news for small businesses. And this has actually passed legislation. The instant asset write-off's now up to $30,000. So from 2nd of April 2019 until 30 June 2020, all businesses with a turnover of $50 million or less will be able to write off instant assets up to $30,000. So that's a massive win in this economy to be able to, if you do need to reinvest in the business, you get the tax benefit straight away rather than over a number of years. The lower company tax rate will be progressively reduced to until 2022, where those companies turning over less than 50 million will meet certain conditions will be entitled to a 25% tax rate. If you've got over $50 million in turnover, you still need to be paying the 30% tax rate at this stage. 61 million over 3 years of support of funding to support small and medium enterprises to export Australian goods and services to overseas markets. And then various measures in relation to reducing the cost of doing business, including the creation of a small business tax division within the Administrative Tribunal, Appeals Tribunal, and establishing a small business concierge service within the Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman Office. Single touch payroll. So a lot of people probably aren't really aware of what's actually happening, and there's been quotes around that it's a bigger thing since GST. Most businesses aren't prepared for it. It will affect everyone from 1 July 2019. Single touch payroll is the reporting of tax, so PAYG, withholding tax, and super information directly to the ATO each time that you run a payroll. So instead of reporting it on your monthly BASs or your quarterly BASs, you actually have to it'll be real life every week or every fortnight or month whenever you pay. The ATO are looking at businesses that are not meeting their tax and super obligations on an ongoing basis. So at the moment, the ATO doesn't know what you don't lodge. So if you don't lodge the liability, they can't work out how much you actually owe to them. Many of the accounting software providers already are compliant with the single touch payroll, and there's some low or no cost solutions if you're not on a provider that is. I suppose the scary part about this is obviously the ATO is going to have a lot more data, and with data they become very, I suppose, game in what else they can do. So there is no proof of where this data is going to go. Does it lead to fair work, and are you underpaying employees, in terms of hourly rates and so forth? So questions that haven't been answered, but it's quite, the more data they get, obviously, the more compliance focused that they're going to be trying to push everyone to make sure they're compliant. So even a mistake could see you, with fair work action and so forth. So they're not saying it's going there, but I would strongly suggest that they would be trying to share the data around as many agencies as possible if they're going through this process. So not just checking to make sure you're compliant from a single touch payroll point of view, but also checking all your actual employment records and making sure they're all above board. Onto the territory budget. So there's some pretty big numbers in terms of what the deficits and so forth are going to look like over the few years, and we'll go into some of the spendings. But budget repair savings announced in April. They're talking about saving 174 million in the 2023 budget. So a few years projections out, some large deficits of 727 million. They're talking, there's been reports of about $1 million a day interest this government's paying. From my calculations, that's pretty spot on to what it would be. So if we think about the cost of having all these debts and all this spending is a huge amount of money each day, and where does it really stop? So some key, I suppose, spending areas. If we're in the tourism industry, we're going to be getting about $63 million. So Turbo 2 stimulus package, the 19 budget is delivering 20 million over 2 years for community festivals. So 12 million for community and 8 million for major events. Major events are Base in the Grass, V8s, Red Centre Nats, Darwin Festival. They're going to still continue to bring sporting events to the NT, so 1.7 million to host the AFL Premiership Games and $1 million to host the NRL Games as well for the next year. Regional and cities deals, 504 million. The major ones are 46.6 million to revitalise the Darwin CBD, 31 million to redevelop State Square, 14 million to redevelop or revitalise the Alice Springs Town Centre as well. So it's not just Darwin that's getting a fair share of money, it's also the regional areas as well. 82 million on police and fire facilities and 71 million on safer children and families. So 66.9 million over 5 years to implement an information management platform to improve service coordination for safer children and families. 22.9 million over 5 years for a new staffing model for the youth detention facility. 12.9 million over 4 years for local community through Regional Youth Services Fund. 10.2 million over 3 years for the infrastructure support for regional youth justice programs. On health, they're spending 1.72 billion. The big one on that is 1.3 billion to resource the top end and Central Australia Health Services. 15.5 million to provide assessments, withdrawals and specialised alcohol treatment. Education and training, $1.28 billion, so 53 million to develop skills training through RTOs. 27 million to support training and apprentices through that program as well. So education, they're spending 518 million on government schools, including 76 million towards meeting centralised school costs as well. Private investment funding, so the 2019 budget also supports private investments to accelerate economic growth. 89 million to establish a local jobs fund to provide new job creating stimulus projects, so capital grant targets and so forth. Gas and resources, 6.5 million to continue to develop a 4-year plan, 26 million resourcing. The territory program to stimulate resource exploration and investment. $564 million on roads and transport for people in that industry. And then housing, they're going to be spending 1.1 billion over 10 years for the remote packaging, 151 million on public housing, including 72 million on 72 million to deliver a 2-year package of urban housing as well. So plenty of money being spent around, and hopefully, that flow-on effect. But we do, I suppose, this budget is still a spending budget, and we do really need to be focusing on the growth of the economy and the population as well. So, sorry, that was a little bit boring and lots of numbers, but I suppose the thing with the federal budget is we've got to be mindful that depending on who gets in this weekend, this can all change. The only one thing that's legislated at the moment is instant asset write-off. Everything else is sort of up for grabs depending on which political party gets in. So think carefully when you're voting this weekend in terms of what businesses need to be expecting over the next few years. And then, obviously there's a lot of talk about what people should be, or what each party is going to be spending their money on, what they're going to be helping with. But at the moment, it's all promises until they get in. So thank you for listening.